Germany, a great country with delicious food, Deutsche Schäferhund, and people walking around in hilarious clothes. But do they know how to make good video games? This is what I'm here to find out. Germany has made video games ever since the 80s, so they are definitely not new in the competition. And I have found many video games I didn't even know was made in Germany, which definitely surprised me. I have bought a lot of games in Germany over the years, because they are way cheaper than in Denmark. They are great at selling video games for a fair price, which gives them a big thumbs up for me. I'm always interested in finding new and strange video games. So grab your schnitzel, your bristles, and let's start the show.
Dance with the devil!
This game is like a fusion of Dungeon Keeper and Warcraft 3. You are an evil lord who gets bored. So now you wanna take over the world. A simple plot with a lot of humor and internet memes. Lots and lots of memes like
it's over 9,000
and troll things.
What?
I'm not really a big fan of these kinds of games, but I must admit I have really enjoyed this game because it's so different in many ways than Dota 2 or League of Legends. It brings back the nice feeling of being evil in a controlled scenario, creating demons and burning down villages. Things you can just laugh about. The Dungeon 3 player has time, has control, has patience, and does not require the last meta to have fun. Missions and skirmishes can easily take 1 hour or more, depending on your playstyle. The mechanics work fine and the game is very polished. Once you get your shortcut keys down, the interface can be managed without a problem. In the later levels, they are a bit too unbalanced in my opinion. Makes me just wanna swear a lot, but whatever. In the end, this game may have some flaws, but it does what a Dungeon Keeper like game is supposed to do today. This game is just you, your dungeon, your creatures. Lots of time and your own ridiculous fantasy of being evil itself. A game where you can just relax, drink coffee and have a good time. Do you like the video so far? Then please hit the like button and let me know in the comments what country we should check out in the next video. Now, let's continue with
Feed my black heart.
I liked the game when I started it. Huge map with 33 locations, interesting story of revenge and madness and mysterious powers. Lots of sets of items which could be combined, armor sets, etc. Poisons, traps, potions, you name it, and it kept me hungry for more. Elaborate spell and skill trees, lots of options to develop the characters, and then it's suddenly over. Out of the 33 locations on the map, only 20 can be reached, the rest is decoration. You can't even buy DLC to visit these places and continue the story. The whole item and skill system is oversized for the pretty straightforward story of revenge. I never got to try most of the poisons and traps and spells. The story just comes to a hasty end. It has a very weird art style, but I kind of like it a bit. But graphics still are not very good, and this game was released in 2015. Looks like a PlayStation 2 game, but a lot of effort went into the design the platform for this game. But halfway through it, the programmers realized that creating the scenarios was time consuming and was also delaying the final release date, so they made a few shortcuts. Dropped drastically the number of scenarios and just aim it at completing the story cycle to publish the game. If they have made a big DLC pack with more locations and more enemies, this could have been a great game, but they never did. So I say, skip this game. There is a lot of better turn-based strategy games on Steam you can check out. The story starts off with when her grandfather gets ill. Anna has to find a cure out in the world. She has lived isolated on the farm all of her life, and her grandpa always warned her of all the dangers out there. So when she ventures out, she immediately gets captured by an evil witch. The story is told in 6 chapters, of which the first is an introduction. Every chapter has a new scene with many new dangers and all kinds of crazy characters like robots, ghosts, and a little boy so trapped inside a teddy bear. which is pretty dark for a point and click game. The drawings are relatively simple. The scenes are mostly empty without too much detail. This of course makes the gaming experience easier. All objects are easy to identify. The main character Anna is kind mean half of the time, but actually I think it really gives her a personality, which is a good thing when you are trying to tell a story. And she also gets psychic powers, which I thought was pretty cool. But overall, all this sounds cool, but the story gets pretty mediocre in the end. So if you really want to play this game, get it cheap. This is a game I have a lot of mixed feelings about. Like,
What? That was awesome!
the turn-based battles are really repetitive. Everybody says the combat is like Final Fantasy, but actually it is more like the Breath of Fire games. It's extremely rare you ever learn new abilities. The combat is not bad, but they are very much the same all the time. But even after seeing that, I pretty much enjoyed everything else about the game. The story is set in a war-torn land. Jane Echoes plays you in a nation who has known peace for many generations. You start out playing as a mercenary named Glenn, who's supposed to go on a quick in and out mission. This sets in motion the events of the game, which involve a weapon of mass destruction, angry pity gods, and reincarnation. This gives way for many points of intrigue in the story. There is plenty here and took me 42 hours to beat. I find that this game doesn't have much replay value because there isn't much to change outside of your cast, as most serve a specific rule. What Jane Echoes does to stray away from the classic turn-based is introduce an overdrive gauge. This gauge moves with every action taken. The overdrive gauge brings strategy into how the player chooses their actions. Each special skill is classified and using skill that matches your overdrive gauge when move the cursor inside. The objective is to stay in the green for added advantages such as extra damage and reduced skill cost. If the overdrive reaches the red, enemies do more damage and skills cost more. Bosses take advantage of this gauge by using moves that mix out the normal order of the overdrive gauge. Later, the game introduced awesome mechs that players can pilot that add an extra dimension to area traversal and discovery. These mechs do substantial amount of damage and change the overdrive movement by linking it to gears of your mech. Having your mech in a certain gear will move the gauge in a given direction. This change alone keeps the game from just smashing the skill that does the most damage. Sometimes you'll have to sacrifice a few turns to make sure you don't go in the red and suffer the penalties. The content of each side mission varies, but for the most part they hit. There are some heavy hitting side stories and others are pretty lighthearted. In classic RPG form, there are secret boss fights that test the build of your group. There are also special beast hunts that only occur if special conditions to make them appear are met. Both of these tasks do reward you with special equipment and weapons for your troubles. But overall, the 2D graphics, music and story are really high quality here. Only that combat is kind of a letdown. But I easily think this game is worth $25.
I'd buy that for $1.
Here we go!
Gianna Sisters used to be the famous Super Mario ripoff from Germany from the 80s.
You suck!
But thankfully, this game is quite original. The one additional mechanic to the typical running, jumping and dodging of any platformer is the wall switching of the two sisters. With the press of a button you can switch between them, going from the lighthearted and colorful environment of the first to the hellish nightmare of the second. Both the music and graphics drastically change between the two, an effect that is incredibly cool to witness. But alternating between worlds also plays into the gameplay with certain platformers and machines only appearing and functioning in one or the other, as well as certain objects reversing direction or the entire cyclical property. It sounds more complicated than it actually is and takes only moments to grasp when you see it in action, but is used intelligently in conjecture with the other obstacles in the game to test your skills and reflexes without resulting to cheap level designs or traps. This game has that Donkey Kong Country 1 difficulty, but thankfully It's pretty easy at the first levels. You can play it on easy mode, but I will actually recommend playing it on normal mode, because I think that difficulty is perfect for this game. They did a wonderful job with the music, and the graphics are great also. But as the last note, the only thing I really didn't like was the last levels. They are just repeats of the first levels, just more difficult. They could have done a little more, but whatever. I think it's a fine, cheap little game on the go, like on the Steam Deck. ITORAH is a hand-drawn Metroidvania game with great story, and also all the characters in this game are really entertaining, but ultimately fails in creating engaging combat and lacks any sort of tension or challenge. The biggest issue is that the combat never feels very engaging. It's extremely simple and never really involves. You have an axe-like weapon that later on can be charged up to do more damage or can be thrown like a boomerang. The problem is that every attack feels very slow and cumbersome. Another issue is that there are tons of tiny cannon fodder that are hard to hit based on how slow your attack is and the exact placement you need to have in order to hit them. Being that a majority of the game is spent attacking, this is a massive problem. That combat never feels very fun. Another issue is that ITORAH never really offers anything new or innovative to the genre. It plays it really safe. This would have been fine if released in 2014 or 2015. But in 2022, there are so many dynamic and challenging Metroidvanians out there to compete with. If you are going to play it really safe mechanically, then you need to make up for it with a really well-rounded and engaging experience. Unfortunately, ITORAH isn't able to do that. The world of ITORAH is never really that interesting to explore. It always marks on the map the next location to go to. Even if it didn't, it would still be way too linear. The sense of wonder and reward of exploring off the beaten path is never present here. Even if you do try your best to go your own way, the secrets that you will find are never that interesting. And that is very important for a Metroidvania game. It's always one of 3 currencies, and the rewards for trading in those currencies are never very exciting either. Better to skip this one.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
This game tries to be like the Legend of Zelda games, but mostly fail at everything they are trying to make. XCL is a game with a good story, interesting universe, good visuals overall, good soundtrack and interesting gameplay mechanics. But the game are buried in a huge amount of game-breaking glitches, bugs, bad design choices, or for balance in the difficulty of the boss fights. Since there are some levels that have to be beaten with a luck element, complete lack of critical quality of life, features like checkpoints / better placement of the save points, tutorials, really bad optimization, boring puzzles, broken cinematics where characters literally get glitched or bugged in your face, complete lack of important animations in some characters, since you can easily see them move around without making use of any animation, and the list goes on. If they have just made a difficulty slider and improved on the combat, this could have been a cool little game, but this game has been out for a year and still has the same problems. So I say, stay far away from this game. Big thumbs down from me, sadly. And finally, holy moly, this is a difficult game, but I actually had a lot of fun. The big negative is that this game doesn't have a save system. It only has a password system, which shouldn't exist after 2003 if you ask me. Iridion II feels a lot like an old school Super Nintendo game. Gameplay itself is a vertical shooter that plays very similarly to Nanostray 2. It's not a terribly challenging game, but that might be a positive. The game consists of 15 scrolling stages with unique backgrounds and bosses. The color palettes are great, the enemies and projectiles pop out very well. The levels are usually pretty engaging, but I would say near the end they get samey, especially since the projectile patterns and enemy AI don't change much and there aren't many stage gimmicks and set pieces. There's a variety of different weapons to choose from and a weird mechanic where you can shred where the secondary shields are positioned. I didn't really understand the point of that. I always kept them at the side. Do I recommend this game? Yes, but only if you can get it cheap. It takes only about 2 hours to beat this game. It's not a groundbreaking game, but it's a unique game with good music and good sprite work. But I enjoyed playing a relaxing and straightforward, almost modern mob game. Danke, meine liebe Herr. So, that was some video games made in Germany. We had some highs and lows. But in the end, I really think Germany has made a lot of great video games. Out of all the games I played, they were mostly positive. It's always interesting to see how different the gameplay is compared to America or Japan. And when you know how to make great food and video games at the same time, you're doing a pretty good job. But anyway, tell me, what is the next country we should check out? Leave a comment below. I'm Rijad, and as always, I will see you next time right here on OmegasMovie.